the show, George Basile. He is a member of Temple Student Government and Parliament, and we're excited to have him on. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing well. I mean, it was raining all this morning, so.
I know it was.
But we're getting better. The career fair was today, at least for SMC.
How did that go? You go to the career fair?
I did. It got crowded really quickly, but it was fine. It was fine. You know.
Oh, there you go. How you doing, George?
I'm doing fantastic, Gino. Thank you for having me.
There we go. Well, thank you for being on air. I'm really excited about this, George. So today we're going to be talking about big news here on campus here in Temple University. We're going to be talking about recovery housing access for Temple students. George, tell us about what's the current situation with Temple housing.
Sure.
Recovery housing, excuse me.
So currently we don't offer any specific alternatives that tailored to recovery housing, and recovery housing is an alternative that provides clean living and mandated group therapy for people that want to continue the recovery while they're here at Temple.
So right now, I was reading that we do have living learning communities that are reserved for students who are recovering, but is that enough for students in recovery here at Temple?
So we do have a Clean Living LLC here on campus, but that doesn't go far enough in the group therapy aspect of recovery housing, and it doesn't provide some of the intensive nature and anonymity that recovery housing does propose.
And I remember we were talking at PSOC, like we always do, George. We were talking about the nearest recovery house is actually not even in North Philadelphia. It's in South Philadelphia.
Yeah, actually, I was talking to a few Temple students who have to commute all the way from South Philadelphia via the Broad Street line up to campus. And the problem with that is the trans passes that were afforded at a discount don't apply to the Broad Street line. So these students are paying more for their transportation up here, plus they're not getting the campus lifestyle we want to afford everybody.
Wow, that's very unfortunate and sad. So what do you do? We just heard in the news that you just put a bill before Parliament to address this issue. What's the plan?
Yeah, so we had it come before the Student Life Committee. I gave my best possible testimony for the bill, and Student Life approved it unanimously with only one adjustment to the text. Now it goes before the floor. It did reach the floor this past Parliament meeting, but the problem was we ran out of time because of rooming, scheduling. With the Student Center, we have these crazy
there's so much going on.
Yeah, I know. So we got kicked out, and we weren't able to get to the bill. But I have resubmitted it. It is going with the same sponsorship of committee. It'll be proposed April 3rd, and I can almost guarantee you it will come to a vote on April 3rd. We will not be letting it go to the wayside, and I will not let it go to the wayside.
There we go. Thank you, George, for fighting for those out there. Who did you go and interview? I saw on Facebook. I know you love your social media, George. I love your photos, by the way.
Thank you.
I saw that you met with city officials downtown regarding this.
Yeah.
What did they have to say? Yeah,
so I met with Director David Holloman, the director of chronic homelessness for the city. We met to talk about how we would better serve a proposal that the mayor put in his 2018 budget address, which was for building supportive housing around the city. And I read that budget address, and I thought, a rational and a reasonable assertion would be to set up a meeting with Director Holloman. We had a very productive meeting. He gave us some statistics which were absolutely appalling in my view, which was that homicides from 2015 to 2016 had actually were being outpaced by drug overdose deaths by almost triple the amount.
Oh my
gosh.
So
we're seeing opioid and heroin overdoses actually tripling homicides.
And this is being fueled rise due to the growing opium epidemic here in Philadelphia and across our country.
Yeah, and actually what Director Holloman told me was that we're seeing some of the strongest and most affordable drugs being pushed here through Philadelphia here in actually one of Temple's backyards, Kensington. So we're seeing blocks away the epicenter of the drug and opioid epidemic.
Wow, that's staggering numbers, Taylor.
Yeah. What is your plan to act? Are you just going to open another house on Temple's campus? Are they going to rent a house? What is your plan for the recovery house to actually become a reality?
Sure. So, we're not actually afforded statutory power as Parliament to direct administration to and tell them what actions to be taken. But we do express the student opinion. So, this bill would express the student opinion given its passage. But from what is in the text of the bill is that we want administration to make sure that the concerns of the community and the interests of the community are being preserved in this bill. So we want to make sure that we're not building any more buildings, and we're not trying to gentrify anything else. So that we're going to make sure that our neighbors and the community that we're a guest of is taken care of through this bill, and then through any bills that we do pass. But also, I think that a reasonable avenue to achieving recovery housing would be blocking out a floor of a already existing building and utilizing that space for 20 or so students who would be able to get that group therapy and get the intensive services that would be afforded by recovery housing.
And do you have any idea, you might not know, how many people about Temple's campus are in long-term recovery or trying to do that? Is there any statistics on that at all?
Temple does not report the statistics of students who are in long-term recovery or in recovery at all. But I have spoken to a few students and constituents that expressed that they were in their own recovery. I spoke to a Masters of Public Health, a student who gave me a testimony to give before Parliament about how he was in his own recovery, and that recovery housing really would have helped him. He also directed me to people over at the Haven at Drexel, which is a recovery housing initiative over at Drexel. And so mostly anecdotal. However, I believe that, these are remnant of a bigger problem that we're seeing.
Drexel has a on-campus recovery house.
Yeah, they have what they call the Haven at Drexel, and it is a Cleveland Living LLC combined with group therapy and all these different services for people in recovery. However, it only serves roughly 6 people.
6 people. Wow.
Yeah, and that is just not a feasible number for here at Temple. So we're trying to explore avenues for how we would better achieve that for, being Philadelphia's largest university.
Now, have you reached out to administration? Have you heard any feedback from administration regarding this idea and going forward?
Sure. So President Cowan and I have been interacting with administration pretty heavily. They're actually very proactive about this. They've explored it before, to understand better how we're going to go about this, because even given the passage of it and given actionable actions are taken, it would still be a very long process. We just had gender inclusive housing get implemented. That was like a 4 or 5 year process. This would definitely, we understand from my perspective as the junior representative, we understand that this isn't going to be fast, and we don't want it to be fast because we want to get this right the first time. So we want to make sure that we're taking the time and the steps necessary to make sure that we're, keeping our students safe and giving them the college experience that we think they deserve. And
this bill doesn't limit any options. This is a pretty just saying, administration, what is the best possible avenue to really handle this issue? That there isn't a set in stone pathway right now, that we are open to exploring other ideas.
Yeah, it would express the student opinion that administration should take and try to find avenues for which we would be able to achieve this recovery housing and and possibly implementing it in the future. There's no guarantees to bills that we pass, and I fully understand that, but I also understand that administration is on the student side. So I'm fully confident that they would be willing to work with us on this.
Now, when you say recovery, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean solely just for drug and alcohol addiction? Are you talking about other kinds of addiction, like gambling, even sex addiction?
Sure. So this would actually be more along the lines of drug and alcohol addiction, because those seem to be the most, for lack of a better term, the most mortal and the ones that present the highest risk to our students. Our students that do have gambling and sex addictions, we would refer them over to Tunnelman Counseling Services, which we just passed a bill, by the way, to make sure that they got the proper resources they needed for expansion, and they just got moved over to 1700 North Broad to a bigger space so that we could afford better resources for our students and their mental health services.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic work, George. So going forward, when April 3rd, when you bring it back up, Is it going to pass? You're confident that this is going to make it through?
Yeah, I mean, you know me. I'm a pretty confident guy. But I've heard a lot of verbal support from other members of Parliament, and I'm pretty confident in some of the input I've been receiving. We've definitely gotten some constructive criticism, which I'm always very open to, because this is a very fluid process, and I'm looking forward to going and hearing more input from everybody. Even given the passage of this bill, I'm very open to hearing other aspects and other input of how we could better implement this and make sure that we're serving our students best.
How long has this been in the works for you?
So I would say about roughly 2 months now, from like the actual legislative side of it. However, we we have, in our research, we found that Temple News had been reporting on this issue since 2005. So this has been a pressing issue for Temple University since 2005, or, documented precedented issue for about roughly 12 years. And also, we're in the midst of an opioid epidemic and an overdose epidemic that is affecting the nation, specifically in the Northeast, very hard. So that started roughly around 2011, where we saw a real spike in overdose deaths.
And what made you decide to make this one of your big policy initiatives this year?
Sure. So this is shaping up to be one of my last policy initiatives.
Your last? Oh, no,
I
George,
know.
you're leaving us so
I'm
soon.
so sorry, Gino. I will not be exploring my bid for re-election. I'm dedicating myself to the city of Philadelphia. But this will be one of the last initiatives, and it became one of my key initiatives because I saw so much support for it, and also this has personal salience for myself because my father's in his own recovery. He unfortunately was addicted to painkillers. However, now he is, he's been a hero in my eyes. He's been seeking. He sought out the recovery and the resources afforded to him. He was put in a great position. Now he's advocating for this up in Long Island, and he's making sure that everybody up there in a particularly hard-hit part of Long Island for the opioid epidemic is getting the help that they need.
So an extremely personal life experience has led to such great, hopefully what will be continuing change within here in the Temple community.
Yeah.
George, I want to thank you for coming on. It has been such a pleasure. Definitely keep following him. What's your Twitter handle? Plug it. Well, I'm going to plug you.
Sure. So it's at Rep Basile, REPBASILE, and my personal is JG Basile, and that's on Twitter.
JG Basile on Twitter. You hear that, folks. You better follow him. Thank you again,
Thank you
George.
so much for coming.
Thank you, guys.